Good morning. My name is John Von Paris, and I am the chairman of the MDTA Finance Committee. Hereby call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 9 a.m. In accordance with the live streaming law. This meeting is being conducted via video conference and is being live streamed on the MDTA Finance Committee webpage. All members will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. To minimize background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones except when speaking. I ask that those who are presenting or answering a question to please turn your video and audio on when speaking. When you're done, please turn your video off and put your audio on mute. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no media who have pre-registered to comment at this morning's meeting. Also, I wanted to make everyone aware that beginning in November, all Finance Committee meetings will be held at 9 a.m. on the second Thursday of the month, unless it conflicts with a holiday. The new meeting dates for the remainder of 2022 have been updated on the website. At this time, we will begin with agenda item number 1, the approval of the minutes from September 6, 2022. Is there a motion to, Member Rosen?
Motion.
Thank you. Second?
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are hereby approved. The rest of the items today, item 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are updates. And we will begin with the update on the Canton Railroad Company, Deb Sharpless, and John Magnus. Good morning. Present. Good morning, Deb. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Welcome, Mr. Magnus.
Thank you.
Morning. I'll just be brief. Annually, we invite Canton Development Corporation to come and provide the board members, specifically the Finance Committee, an update. And this is the annual update, and we've asked John to join us today. So let me turn it over to John. He has some materials prepared for you to discuss.
Thank you.
Good morning. I sent out hope you have the handouts that I sent. So I'll just kind of go over those briefly and then actually open it up for any questions anyone may have. But just as a little bit of background, as a reminder, the MDTA owns 100% of Canton Development Company, and Canton Development Company owns 100% of Canton Railroad Company and Free State Logistics Services, Inc. The Canton Development Company, which is the holding company, was acquired by MDTA in 1987 because the rail access into the then being constructed Seagirt Marine Terminal was owned by Canton, and Canton was in receivership at the time and up for sale at the bankruptcy auction. And the MDTA stepped in and bought it to support the port's access at that time. The year 2021 was a rather disappointing year for us. A little bit of background. Our largest rail shipper, a company called Apex Petroleum Fuel and Terminal Corporation, they were a large shipper of petroleum products. Due to a lot of the lack of fracking and all that in the United States, they lost their contract to ship fuel oil by rail. That was our most significant rail customer. And up until this point, they still are not really shipping anything significant by rail, and that's taken quite a financial hit on us. So for the year 2021, our revenues were down. We had $4.4 million in revenue. Another $500,000 in additional income, which is mostly things like rental income, leases, licenses, that type of thing. And our net income after taxes was $272,000. That may be adjusted when the auditors get finished with it. I haven't seen that final result. We just got that yesterday and sent that over to MDTA, but That was probably the most disappointing year we've had at Canton, probably in the last 20 years. A little bit about Canton itself. Canton has 22 employees. We have 4 locomotives, about 16 miles of rail in and around the port area. We have about 25 customers that are rail active. And on average, we do about 7,000 rail cars a year. And the revenue at Canton by itself was $3.5 million. Some of the key things that we're working on, we would like to acquire the rest of the rail yard that we are located in. CSX owns half of the rail yard and has not utilized that yard in probably 20 years. We've been trying to work with them to acquire it, and we've kind of gone to the MDOT to try to see if we could get some sort of push from MDOT to help with the acquisition of that. That would help us to provide other services, storing rail cars for revenue and that type of thing. We also want to work on, and we have a grant request in to help us to improve our rail yard for when the Howard Street Tunnel project is completed. We need to upgrade the rail yard that CSX uses to go in and out of the port. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We are just about to complete a trackage rights agreement with CSX, which will allow us to move traffic between the port and Sparrows Point. And that would be a good revenue growth opportunity for us. We're pretty close to getting that agreement signed. And then we still have some other operational issues to work out, but that would actually be a good benefit for us and for the port. And we would like to acquire the King Street property, which MDTA owns. We have a potential new customer opportunity there, and we would like to acquire that property for development. As far as the grants go, we are applying for a CRISI grant for approximately $7 million to replace 28 switches and some track on our line. And we would have to match up to, at this point, $1.5 million for that grant. The grant's going to go in probably sometime in early November. And we're in the process now of getting letters of support and that type of thing. We have received a VW grant, and we have replaced 2 of our locomotives with environmentally friendly units. They have replaced 2 units we had that were almost 50 years old. And so both of those are actually in service right now. In our cash and investments, as you can see, we probably have close to a little over $7 million of accumulated cash and investments. That number has been fairly stable, and it's still growing slowly despite the fact that our revenues were down. And mostly because we have such a high amount of depreciation expense that if you looked at it, it's a non-cash item, so it actually helps us to have a positive cash flow despite our revenues being down. And Free State Logistics Services is an operation we have up in Cecil County in the Principio Business Park. And we serve General Electric's appliance distribution facility there in Maricold, which is a cold storage warehouse. And we have 3 employees there and 2 locomotives. And they do about 4,500 cars a year. And the revenue there was about $960,000 last year. And that has been the biggest growth area for us, has been at Free State. And we have another potential customer looking to move in there, which would provide us with another 1,500 to 2,000 rail cars a year of sand moving to various locations. Some of the key issues that we have is we're looking to do that expansion up in Cecil County with the sand operator. And we're in the process of getting approvals from CSX to do track work in that area. And we're also looking for a small site up there where we can do what's known as transloading. where we could transload material out of rail cars into trucks for delivery. And we're in the process of trying to locate a viable site for that. And we're also trying to work with Norfolk Southern to see if about maybe perhaps putting an intermodal operation for NS up in Cecil County, and we could sort of piggyback off of that to do the transloading operation there. And we're still in discussion with Norfolk Southern about that. In areas where MDTA can help us is working with MDTA and MDOT with as far as acquiring the Penn Mary Yard from CSX. We would like to acquire the Kane Street property from MDTA. And since the I-95 construction is done, there's a couple of small parcels that MDTA has around our building that we would like to be able to acquire or lease for future development. So again, the business levels in 2021 were disappointing. We're still working with our customers to try to grow the business here, but we're in a gentrified community that there aren't a lot of industrial sites. So we have to work with the customers that we currently have on our line. And other than doing some internal cost cutting, we're still trying to see what we can do to grow the business for the customers that we have. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Any questions? Member Arden?
Member Ardinger, I do. First of all, I appreciate, we appreciate the fact that with the downturn with the apex that you're looking for alternatives, which I fully support. And specifically looking at the areas where the MDTA can assist, is there anything that you can provide to us where you can show where you think you would be able to recoup this investment over time with the new form of business that would be generated?
Yes, I could put together a pro forma that would show what that would look like, and absolutely get that over to you.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question. So appreciate the report. So John, are you doing all this business development and trying to develop new customers and putting these arrangements together to generate new business? Is that all on you, or is there someone else in your organization who's also part of outreach with customers and sales and so forth?
It's just me basically, and we're small, so we don't have too many people that just do one thing. We sort of all do many things. So I'm sort of the sales and marketing person at this point.
Okay. Is there any support on that front aside from, I understand, with some of these land plays, but is there any other support that you need in order to push some of these deals over the edge so that we can enhance and increase revenue, whether it's at the state level, political level, at the MDTA level?
Right now, the most help we're getting is from MDOT and from the port, which is the two agencies, frankly, that we probably spend most of our time with. So at this point, we're working closely with the port to try to help us grow some port-related business. So it's a mutual benefit for us and the port. And so, yeah, at this point, I think MDTA is aware of some of the issues that we're working on, and we're working closely with them on the property issue.
Thank you.
And Member Rosen, I mean, as the shareholder of Canton, we try to stay within that role, by appointing or selecting the directors that sit on the Canton's board. So regarding the real estate, John and our John on real estate side, they've been in touch with each other, corresponded. So we have interest in Canton succeeding, but we also have to always try to balance that with the responsibilities we have to MDTA, the value of land, you know, so.
And to follow up on that, the way we treat everything is the relationship between us and MDTA is pretty much the relationship that MDTA would have with any other business. And so we treat it that way. So, you know, when we make requests of MDTA, they're no different than if any other entity would make a request of MDTA, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of how we've been treating, you know, the relationship. And then we use our board of directors as sort of the liaison between the two.
No, Carol, you have a question?
John, I may have missed it, but could you expand a little on the significance of acquiring that land that CSX owns? That mean?
Yeah.
To do that?
Yes. One of the major revenue sources that small railroads around the country do is storing rail cars for shippers for a fee. And at this point, we don't have enough capacity to do that. The rail yard, which is connected to our rail yard, so it looks like one contiguous piece of property, would allow us to offer that service so we could generate revenue by storing rail cars. That's one of the ideas. And then, of course, in times when we do get busier, it gives us a little extra capacity that we can, you know, store and handle rail cars.
Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
I have a couple of questions. Can you hear me? I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
As it relates to your comments, I'm certainly, you know, looking at ways, you know, I guess we represent the shareholders. We are the share, you know, MDTA is the share. We have an investment in Canton. So certainly want to help. We don't want to get into the, you know, tell you how to run your business, but I think that we have, I'm sure we can help in some ways. I have a question. CSX Rail Yard, the acquisition of that, I think you mentioned that would be of interest. You just, member Carol, just asked a question on that. You responded. The question I have would be, if we're going to buy that, I'm just saying, if you are going to buy that, why would not CSX already want to retain that for revenue generation? Is that not what they do?
No, they don't typically like to do that type of business.
Okay.
They've kind of left that to the small railroads to do. And they don't have any real use for that property. That track used to be many years ago when General Motors was here. It was their rail yard for serving General Motors. And so since GM left, they have pretty much abandoned that rail yard. So in fact, they've ripped the tracks out of it. The tracks are gone at this point. So
Okay.
that would all have to be reconstructed.
And the completion of the Howard Street project, how will that impact your revenue?
Well, the anticipation is that the ports intermodal business will increase dramatically during that time, which we of course get a fee for every container that comes over our tracks in and out. So we should see an increase in our revenue from the intermodal business.
And then the final question is, Cecil County is really exploding. It seems to me it's a great opportunity, and we're in there already. We're set up there. You are. I think there's probably a lot of opportunity, and I think you were mentioning that where you want to extend lines possibly, or you know, whatever, to get to service some of that expansion of those companies up there.
Yes.
So I'm sure that's going to be, and I think in a comment, I think member Ardinger mentioned pro forma, and I think that would be interesting. But bigger picture, and again, not to get into the weeds or anything, but if you're seeking help, you know, how can we help to understand more about the, you know, like a presentation a little bit more in-depth presentation to members that would be interested. I think that would be very helpful so that
Yeah,
we can be on
absolutely.
the same page, and if we can, as staying within our role, help. I would like to help any way I can.
I appreciate that. And yeah,
Yeah.
I would be more than willing. We could actually, if anyone's interested, we could have a meeting here at Canton where we could do a brief tour and some background on exactly what happens here and what we're doing. But we'd be more than happy to do that.
Great. And also, I guess I want to thank you and your team, what you're doing. I know that the impact with energy, the changes with in the energy mode of use, whatever, is impacting your business and many other businesses and consumers. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
No.
John, do you have anything else, John, or is that?
But just one mention that may impact us. I don't know if anyone has heard, but one of the largest rail unions rejected the negotiated settlement. So the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Workers has rejected that settlement. That could lead to a rail strike if that's not resolved, and that would be pretty dramatic for us. It would basically shut us down if that were to happen. So we'll keep an eye on that, to see how that may impact us.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing it.
So Member Von Paris, we'll just touch, pardon me, I'm struggling with my voice today. We'll touch base with council, make sure that we're fine to work with Canton to schedule basically a tour, an informational tour, to understand their operations better. And then I'll also talk with real estate about the potential of presenting an item, talking about the conversations that we've had involving real estate and specifically the properties that John's mentioning.
Thank you. I think we certainly all want to be in compliance with the law and everything else, the rules here of engagement. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes, at this point, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Item number 3, independent auditors, SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports. And Deb and William Seymour will present this.
Good morning. Bill, I'll just start us off again. SB & Company performed 2 SOC audits for us. They performed a SOC 1 audit for TransCore and CAPS, and then also a SOC 2 audit for TransCore. I won't preempt Bill by talking about the difference of them, of the 2 audits, but we're required to do these, and the outcome's been very positive. So Bill, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Devin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Seymour. I'm the engagement partner with SB & Company. As Deb had mentioned, the scope of services was performance of the SOC 1 audits over both the operations at TransCore as well as CAPS, and as well as performance of a SOC 2 report over TransCore. And I'll walk through our presentation fairly high level. Please stop me with any questions that you may have. The audit period was July 1st of 21 through June 30 of 22. We looked at 11 separate control objectives as described and asserted by TransCore, and then 5 control objectives that were described and asserted by CAPS. As Deb had kind of alluded to, we're going to issue, and we have issued, unmodified, or if you will, clean opinions on the SOC 1 Type 2 reports. On the SOC 2 Type 2 reports, same audit period being from July 1 of 21 through June 30 of 22. It's the first full year of TransCore for this. We had no findings, and we are going to issue an unmodified opinion. On just real briefly on slide 5, what we've done is highlighted some of the differences between the SOC 1 and a SOC 2 report. It really boils down to is the SOC 1 report is really custom designed to really provide for evidence of processes and controls that are in place as it relates to the financial reporting processes, specifically here at MDTA. Whereas the SOC 2 report is based upon information and IT security and is set upon 5 predetermined criteria, or what we call trust service categories, being security, confidentiality, information process privacy, information integrity, and lastly, availability. And so if you will, kind of the SOC 1 report, we look at the controls and kind of, it's almost to think of it as an extension of as part of the financial statement audit process. Your external financial statement auditors will rely upon the report that we issue as part of their evaluation of the controls that are in place at MDTA. Whereas, like I said, the SOC 2 is more of kind of that general item to look and say, how are the IT services working at TransCore? There is some overlap between the 2 reports and some of the criteria that we were looking at, especially as it relates to processing integrity between the 2 of them. And then lastly, when we use the term, we'll say SOC 1 Type 2, SOC 2 Type 2. A Type 1 report is a report that's as of a moment of time. So really what it is we're looking at the description of the controls that are in place, whereas a Type 2 reports are over a period of time, which then means that we actually go through and test the operating effectiveness of those controls over that time period. On slide 6, we have a summary of the results in the different categories. You'll see that it's not 16 because some of the control objectives overlapped between CAPS and TransCore. But you'll notice here, and we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail, there were 3 areas where we had noted exceptions, being in physical access, application and system software changes, and transponder inventory management. And then on the next slide, we highlight the findings that we had at TransCore. Us as auditors, we're not allowed to kind of give severity other than saying we have an unmodified or if we have a modified opinion on the statements. But if you were to compare the number of findings that we had in prior years under the previous service provider versus what we have here in the severity of the types of findings, you'll see that this year is significantly better. And a lot of these, we believe when we have year 2 of performance of the audit, a lot of these will go away because we were still picking up some of the transition from the previous service provider. We had number for 2 out of the 4 monthly inventory counts, the number of transponders selected and counted was not clear. It didn't reconcile within the system. Physical access, we noted that access, that is people walking into the building, was reviewed. However, the documentation of that review was not kept. So from an audit perspective, if it's not there, we can't just presume it's going to be there. We have to see it. Security awareness training, 4 out of 10 people selected for testing. The form wasn't signed. And then lastly, for access into the integrity application for 3 of the 8 new hires reviewed, a supervisor/manager was not specified, and we didn't see where that manager approval happened. So if you will, kind of a documentation item. We had no issues in the underlying processing, the reconciliations, looking at how the cash moved through the processes. For CAPS, we had three main areas. One was on access. There was a person who was set up with a default administrator account We had some issues with the minimum password length and failed login attempts. And then lastly, some developers had access and deployed changes to the production environment. And all of these, we believe, really occurred during the beginning of the year and the transition. Kind of typically when you're setting up new systems, what happens is the IT controls get turned down. And then, we just, as part of the audit, as soon as we brought it to their attention, they started making these as changes. And I'll stop there, see if anybody has any questions, but as I mentioned earlier, no findings on the SOC 2, and we're going to issue unmodified opinions.
Any questions? Okay. If there are any questions, Bill, thank you very much. Deb, do you have any other comments? Or are we good?
No, just, sorry, just that we have some other audits that we'll be presenting to you in the coming months. Financial statements, an A133 audit. But this is the first of a series. So thank you.
And the report is very positive.
Absolutely. As Bill indicated, especially for SOX, this was the first time that they were audited. And, some of these issues are documentation issues. Is not a matter of was it done or not. It was performed. With SOC audits, it's either yes or no. You can't exercise judgment. So if something either it was sitting there in the file or it was not in the file, it's that yes or no. So this was overall, I agree, was a very, very good audit.
And Deb, we have to, we're going to do these every year for TransCore and CAPS. Is that per our contract?
Yes, they need to cooperate with these audits. So we do the SOC 1 audits for financial statement purposes. We have to have them for financial statement purposes. When we have video tolls, more and more DMBs are wanting SOC 2 audits. So that's the reason for SOC 2. This was the first time we've ever had a SOC 2 audit. So it's not only was it the first time that TransCore had a SOC 2 audit under our contract, it's the first time we've ever had one. So I think that's going to be going forward because of the DMBs wanting it.
And just to be clear, that's for purposes of ensuring that and having comfort that our customers' information is protected within their systems.
Right. When we do the lookup to know who a license plate belongs to. That's right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both for your presentation, and we will move on to agenda item number 4, fiscal year 2023 cost of living adjustment. Jeffrey Brown. Morning, Jeffrey.
Good morning, members. It's Chris Thompson. I'll be presenting for Jeff. He had a family emergency, so I'll be handling his 2 items.
Okay. We hope everything's okay. So thank you, Chris.
Yeah. This item is just to advise you of a COLA that the governor announced on September 29th. He announced a 4.5% COLA for all permanent and contractual state employees effective November 1st of 2022. The estimated impact of that COLA for fiscal 23 is $4.9 million. We currently expect to cover that within our existing budget. And we don't plan to bring an amendment, but we'll see how it goes throughout the year. We hope to be able to absorb it at this time. The annualized cost of the COLA will be included in the FY24 budget, which we will present to you next month. Any questions?
Okay. Don't appear to be any questions. Thank you, Chris. We will move on, and I think you're still up for the next item. No, I'm sorry, Deb. I apologize. Deb,
Sure.
you're coming back though with the last one, right? So,
Yes, yes.
okay, sorry about that. Getting a little anxious here, I think.
Okay, so this is an audit item as well. Now this is for the period ending December 31st, 2021. It's our A133 audit. Some people refer to it as a single audit, and it's an audit when you receive a certain threshold of federal funds. And we meet that requirement. TIFIA alone certainly puts us over it, just that alone. And then we've had a couple grants, Belvedere interchange as well. So anyway, we had one finding, and what the finding is, you can see it in your materials. It's we were unable to provide equipment records that focus solely on the equipment that was purchased using confiscated assets. So the agency maintains agency-wide records for basically almost everything. We talked before about the property tags that you can see throughout MDTA, and that extends across every piece of equipment, land, infrastructure, et cetera, that we have. But what's required here are records solely of equipment in which confiscated assets were used. And so we will create those records because we have the comprehensive agency records. We're able to prepare these, and going forward, we'll keep separate records. So this was just an oversight. Didn't realize that these additional records were needed, and that we did not meet the requirement by our agency-wide records. That's any questions?
I think, you said it, the management's going to follow up and implement some changes to this to make sure that we have it covered. We're in compliance with this matter.
Right. Right. We have all the information, but in order to not have this audit finding, we needed to be able to produce it right away, not be able to create it. So in the coming months and all, we'll create the files that are needed, do an inventory, verify everything's accurate.
Okay. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you, Deb. We will move on to the last item on the agenda this morning, item number 6, wage and fringe benefits burden rate. And this time, Christina, I'm sorry about saying that was, I'm skipping that one. So thank you. Here, you're up.
Okay. So item number 6 is information that you all requested regarding the use of fringe benefits overhead rate, otherwise known as the burden rate. Some of the key points are that we use a burden rate to make it a fair and equitable process for apportioning the employees' wages and fringe benefits between the operating and capital budgets. And to make sure that we're meeting our financial standards. The burden rate does provide a fair and equitable process, and it makes sure that we're allocating to the proper budget so that we're meeting our legal rate covenants and debt service coverage. The state required budgeting process and posting actual expenses creates a manageable but misaligned at the sub-object level. So why do we use a fringe benefit rate and an average rate when recognizing personnel expenses. The main reason is to separate personnel-related expenses between operating and capital, which are posted against the budget based on actual hours worked according to an employee's timesheet. This methodology is consistent with other TBUs. We actually modeled this after SHA and has been approved by the FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, when allocating for federal funds. So there are a couple examples on page 2 of your memo, and I guess I'll walk through them if you want. In the example number 1, an employee worked 96 hours in a pay period, which is 48 hours in week 1 and 48 hours in week 2. The total wages were $2,080, which is 80 hours at $20 an hour and 16 hours at $30 an hour. The employee's timesheet recorded 75% of the hours worked as operating related and the remainder is capital. So I'm going to go to the chart on page 3. So you'll see for person number 1, their earnings, $1,560 went to operating and $520 went to capital. So that's just their wages. In order to allocate the fringe benefits, we multiply that by a burden rate. So $1,548 went to operating and $516 went to capital. And that's using an estimated 99.2% civilian burden rate. And in example number 2, an employee worked 40 hours in a pay period. Resulting in wages totaling $1,600. He earns $20 an hour. And the employee's timesheet recorded 80% of the hours as operating and the remainder is capital. So in example 2, $640 went to operating for wages and $160 went to capital. And the burden that was applied to based on those wages was $635 in operating and $159 in capital. So in employee number 3, this employee worked 96 hours in a pay period, 48 hours each week, resulting in total wages of $2,400. 80 hours at $30 an hour, and he earns comp time for any hours worked over 40. The employee's timesheet recorded 75% of the hours worked is operating related, and the remainder is capital. When a person earns comp time, there's no additional dollars earned. They're earning comp time. So in this case, the employee number 3, their wages $1,800 went to capital and $1,800 went to operating and $600 went to capital. And the burden expense applied to that was $1,786 operating and $595 capital. You'll see also in the table that the average wages for the employees were $21.67, $20 an hour, and $25 an hour. All right. So the way we develop the operating budget is all personnel related expenses are budgeted in object 1, which is salary and wages, and object 2, which is technical and special fees, on what's called a sub-object level. There's regular earnings, overtime earnings, Social Security, health insurance, and all that are all separate sub-objects. They're budgeted in accordance with Department of Budget and Management guidelines. We begin by estimating the wages for all filled and vacant positions and using their annual salaries, estimated shift differential, overtime, and percentage of working hours devoted to capital projects and operating activities. These are then budgeted in sub-objects, so 1 through 112, and the budget's reduced to account for anticipated vacancies in turnover, which is sub-object 189. Fringe benefits are estimated based on variable and fixed rates and assumptions, which are provided by Department of Budget and Management. And the fringe items, many of them, like Social Security and pension, are a percentage of salaries. The burden rate is calculated as a percentage of salaries. We determine a separate rate for civilian and sworn positions because the sworn positions have a higher benefit rate for pension. Once the operating budget's approved, the burden rate is determined by dividing the budgeted value of all the fringe benefits by the regular earnings, or less leave. The burden expenses are applied and monitored through a clearing account. At year end, there's a true up, which is a true up entry is recorded to adjust for burden expense being under or over applied. And the account is actually monitored throughout the year. And if it becomes materially under or over applied, the burden rate is revised and applied moving forward. So then the final question on the last page was, why do the fringe benefit, budget, sub-objects, and burden expense not offset? And that's mainly because of leave. Leave is actually a fringe benefit, but it is budgeted in the wages, the annual salary for a person. But when recognizing actual expenses, leave is captured in the burden expense. With that, also on the third page, you'll see a summary chart of the total object 1 and 2 budgets, what the budgeted total was, what the actual amount was, and the difference. That I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Okay. I have a comment. I guess I'm going to have this little guide with me when we review the operating budget. So it's complicated stuff, but certainly appreciate the work that went into preparing this for the committee. And I know Deb was involved, and I think Member Rosen helped, lend his comments to it. Is that right, Jeff? I think you did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, Christina, thanks for putting this together. I think it was prompted by a question we had just by looking at the budget to actual, and I know it gets into a lot of details. And my big takeaways from the analysis, which you laid out really well, is that we do have a methodical process for allocations that is based on time reports that our employees put in to the system, and they are trained to do that correctly, so it's properly allocated between capital and operating. And then my other big takeaway is that we're basically using guidelines that have been that are supported by whether it be the state or federal guidelines. But thank you for putting this together.
Yeah. Absolutely. We apologize that one question, in order to answer it, instead of being a couple sentences, ended up being 3 pages. But I think this was a good discussion. It applies to anything that we're dealing with wages and fringe benefits. It's a process, and we need a fair process to be able to separate capital and operating expenses, all overtime or hours above 80 cannot go to just one budget or another. We need it in order to be fair with our trust agreement, and then we deal with this difference between budgeting and how we have to post the expenditures, but that's manageable.
Well, thank you, Deb. Sometimes I'm asked the question what time it is, and I tell people how to make a watch. But that's it's important to know how sometimes the watch is made. And they're good questions, and hopefully this will bring some clarity, some understanding, further reading if someone wants to really go through it. And I like the fact, as Jeff said, that we're consistent and fair and in compliance with and doing what others are doing. It's accepted, and it's been that way for a while, although it is complex stuff. But anyway, any other questions on this matter? On this item? Okay, thank you both, Chris and Deb. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the meeting. So if there's no other business for the Finance Committee meeting, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Member Carroll. Is there a second?
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.